It will just be a recording of the Discord chat. That's it. I'm hungry too. I want to eat. So I guess we could start our
We
discussion.
can start the discussion.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's go.
So game design. I'm surprised Mauricio came because of 376 trauma maybe, but yeah. All right. So how should we start our conversation? I guess how would you?
Hold on.
So, the main elements that you have to always consider in game design is the notorious MDA framework, which stands for mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. I know.
I thought it. Oh. By the way, is it me or is there echo?
Oh yeah, we always have to start with what is a game. A game is something that people interact with digitally. Well, a video game specifically is digitally.
Digitally.
I mean that's Mimi, but there's some interesting truths in that, like things you need to think about when you're considering like making your game.
Yeah.
Because user interaction is very important.
Yeah. But would you consider a like a flight simulation a game?
A flight simulation a game?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's a game.
But if it's
Yeah.
like flight,
It's a simulator game, but it's a game.
But if it's built for like aviators that are learning how to fly, would you consider that a game? Because they have like they're trying to.
It's gamification. It's gamification of a tool. It's still a game at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like soldiers using armor to practice, you know.
But the difference is that these types of games aren't like fun. Like they're not.
They are fun.
They are
well,
fun.
Not if they're
there are
used
people
for
that enjoy flying.
Not if they're used for professional uses.
I mean, people play Euro Truck and like Euro Truck Simulator, Farming Simulator. They enjoy it. They have fun with it. It's still game. It's on Steam, you know?
Yeah. But I'm talking about
Yeah,
like,
but even if they are made for teaching, it's still like you're still interacting with the digital space in a computer, and you have mechanics, you have rules you're set to follow. So yeah.
So would you say if a game is like something you could something digital that you interact with and doesn't have real life consequences? Like, for example, if you're manipulating like a drone or something, it will like through a screen. You know, drones that you could control through a screen. Like the screen is digital, but the drone is actually going around in real life. So that, I don't know. I don't think I would consider that a game because you're like.
Well, but that's a controlling program. It's not a game. It's not a simulation of anything. As well, you're controlling something in real life.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the definition of a game can be really tricky in a way because it's I think it depends on how you see things. Like for some people that could be a game. I don't know why, but I feel like for some people that could be a type of game. Maybe not what we would consider like maybe like in the industry or professionally what a game is, but it depends.
I'm just bringing that point on because the small difference between the drone like moving in real life and a simulation of a drone is that one is like doing physical things in the real world and the other isn't. So it needs to be like 100% digital for it to be considered a game.
Well, video game.
A video game.
Video game,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Because game itself is more broad than that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but game design, guys. Game design.
But
Yeah.
what makes a game?
I was fixing my audio, and then because I was hearing echo, I was fixing my audio. I come back and I hear you guys talking about simulation. I'm like, wait, what? Wait, what is the conversation?
Okay.
We're all in the Matrix now.
But what makes a good game?
We are. Yes, that's a good question. That's a good question. Let's start with that. That's
so. I think a good game is something that I guess there could be many factors. Yes,
right.
and that has to be fun.
Wouldn't it be?
I don't think
Right.
it needs to be fun.
What is a good game to
I think
you?
it's subjective. Exactly, subjective, like art. Some people like different types of games, right? They enjoy different type of simulations.
So,
Simulation.
do you think it needs to evoke like some sort of like emotional response for it to be successful?
Doesn't really have to. Cookie Clicker is highly successful. People like it.
That's a good
What do you feel from a Cookie Clicker game?
Well, I think you feel
God.
reward. Don't you feel reward? Because
Yes.
basically when you buy new things, you can kind of get like that dopamine kind of. Like it might be something very minor, but like just buying a new item might do like a bunch of like animations and flashes and noises that will like give you like a small dopamine rush.
Very true. Very
So
true.
it's not completely emotionless.
I mean, emotion in of the day evokes chemicals in our brain to make us feel. So
Now we're talking
You
about
wanna break it down.
neurology.
Yeah.
you want to break it down that way.
I think a good game, it can be very subjective too. Like there's games that like maybe a lot of people like a lot of people enjoy Super Smash Bros. But it's not necessarily what am I trying to say? Like it depends on people. Like some people might prefer another game more than that. Another type of game, right? Like maybe a game, I think engagement and immersion. Like if a game is very immersive, would that be something fun? Would that make it a good game? Sorry, would that make it a good game?
Well, if you're immersed, you'll get like emotional responses to it. So I would say yes.
Right.
Even if it's like Cookie Clicker, you're immersed into Cookie Clicker game because you're kind of you're spending time like you're trying to get like the highest like amount of. There was like one Cookie Clicker game where you had to like get a bunch of chickens or something. Like you're immersed in your like farm, getting the most chickens as possible, but like you're still getting like an emotion of like satisfaction when you get a new farm of chickens.
The chicken.
Also, so there's one thing about being immersed and getting emotions, but I think interactivity is very important because there are games that you don't like if it's like a game that's fully based on luck, like chance, like 100% RNG, I wouldn't really consider that a game because like
Casino
like casino slots.
People still play those.
But the
Those are still
casinos
called game, by the way.
Well, the thing about casino slots is that you have the feeling that you have some kind of like involvement into the like the thing. You have like the handle that you kind of feel like you have some kind of effect to it, even though it's 100% like random. But
So
just the fact that you're doing a movement with it, with the handle, like you kind of feel you're interacting with it.
Right.
So basically, it's not movies. It's not music. It's interactive media.
Yeah. Even
Way,
like the
yes.
simple, even like games that you have to do a simple dice roll. Like I would say that
It's
is
still a game, yeah.
interactive because
Interactivity is the
you're
key.
you're doing the action of like rolling the dice. It's not 100% like unless the game was like 100% virtual and the roll of the dice was automatic, I wouldn't consider that a game because you don't have to do the action of rolling the dice. It'll just do it for you. And at that point, I wouldn't consider it a game anymore because you're not doing any physical interaction with it. It's like when I took 376 with Peru, one of the weird examples that he gave for a game that's not a game in quotation that's not a game is Snakes and Ladder. But I personally think that just the fact that you're rolling the dice in the Snakes and Ladder game, I think that's enough interaction, in my opinion, to consider Snakes and Ladder a game because, yeah, it feels like a game. It is a game, basically.
Yeah, that's precisely the
said,
key point here. To quote a book I have here, The Art of Game Design. It's a great book. It says that the games design is very hard because the game designer is trying to create an experience, but everything is just seems to be real. So what the user is feeling with the interaction is completely like given by the things you make in the game, but you have no way of knowing if what he feels is exactly what you imagine he's going to feel. It's the thing you're creating, and like we game designers create things like like a pirate game or a space game, and like we never did those. So
yeah,
we just try, but what is important is that what seems to be real. You know, what's important is what is about. What that interaction is making the user feel, the user experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with like the simple aesthetics of the game. Like if I go back to the Snakes and Ladders, no one would think that game is fun if it's just a straight line going from the beginning to the end. Just the fact that there's like snakes and ladders and you have to avoid them, you're kind of immersed into this weird world where you have to avoid snakes, even if it's just luck. But
right.
Yeah. And same for like pirate in space, like you could have like the simplest mechanics ever, even if it's completely random. Just the fact that you're kind of in this world created for you, like an imaginary world, you could you'll have more fun because you're kind of you're going for a ride. And yeah, so I personally disagree from my professor from 376 because he says Snakes and Ladders in the game, but I think it is, even if it's 100% random. It has user interactivity and it has like a world of aesthetics that you could, have fun with. So use your imagination.
Right. I agree with what you're thinking and what you're saying too.
He said it wasn't at first until he reached the if it feels like a game, it is a game conclusion. Yeah, then he could kind of just like counter.
But that's like, okay, well,
yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I see.
So what are like the main, apart from like a good kind of environment and aesthetic of a game and having minimum one user interactivity, what other elements of a game makes it good? So we have
We're thinking.
I guess it depends like what we're going for.
Yeah, it depends on a lot
so
of
like
what
if
you
you're
want to do.
trying to do a story-driven game, for example, you would want to
focus on the story. You would want to make maybe a really nice story.
Yeah. Even if the only user interaction you have is like using a WASD to move your character around, and
right,
like if the game has like a story that you could like travel through, that I think would be like that's the minimum requirement, but like even with that minimum requirement, you could make a good game simply from the story.
Right.
Visual novel is a good one. Yeah.
You just click and read. Yeah.
But that's where like the story, if for visual novel, that's where like if the story is well written, then that's what really will make it like a really nice type of like experience for the player. Right? It's just like you click it and then you die, and then like it's like versus a story that takes you along, and then it's that really it's like it goes back like I feel like it goes back to like immersion. Like you get really immersed in it, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe like there's emotion involved and you get attached to it, and then it's like and then you get really involved in the story. Then that really makes it like it really sticks with you.
Yeah. But if it's just a story and you don't even click, then it's not a game anymore. It's funny how like,
that's a book. That's a book.
It's just a book. It's funny how like small like the transition from a game to non-game is. It's like the only thing is like the simple click of a button makes it a game.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But then like games that only have one route, like visual novel with one route, so there's no other branching storyline that have you involved in it.
Yeah.
It is still technically a visual novel. It's still a game.
So for things like that, you need more than just user interaction. You need like choice.
No, like I mean, there's choice, visual novels, and there's visual novels no choice at all.
I wouldn't consider them as games though.
But you click through it if it's one path.
Yeah.
Well, that's
just you go through the like it's still like line by line, and you hear like there's voice acting.
But that seems more like
that's like a visual like virtual
book.
Visual novel, exactly.
That seems more like reading and flipping the page.
I wouldn't consider that
rather than playing it.
I think like the simple.
But by definition, it's still being sold as video games.
But that's the thing. It's like if the visual novel itself, like maybe the interaction is not the game. What if the game is reading the book and then finding clues and solving? What if it's a puzzle type of book, right? See, then the game is not about the clicking or like the visual novel itself. It's more about the content. And then
that's
like
still a book.
That's a different thing then.
Well, that's like the difference between that and something that you just read through is that you have to put like effort and a lot of an important part about making a game is that you have to put effort. You can't just kind of laze. I mean, except
that's
for
arguable.
Yeah, maybe except for cookie clickers.
Really, I mean, sometimes reading is pretty hard too. Understanding the content is like sometimes it's not that trivial. Yeah, but I understand. You mean more like you have to put some. It's not only effort, but you go through. How do I put this?
Some Someone wrote.
I think your thinking is correct, but you just use like it's not effort. It's another word for it.
Someone put in our mentioned punish versus reward. So,
Right.
I mean, punish, you're kind of putting in extra effort to try to find like a clue, and a reward is that you could progress in the story. You know?
Yeah, yes, makes sense.
And like finding the clue itself is like an obstacle. So
Right, in a way, it's a challenge. Yep. When you guys do game jams and stuff, and you guys like discuss making games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think like the brainstorming part really embeds a lot of? I mean, I guess the brainstorming is quote unquote the game design brainstorming in a way. Like where
it's usually the most chaotic time.
Yeah.
Right, it is usually.
It's very chaotic.
But it's actually the most exciting one for sure.
Yeah, it's the most fun.
Yes.
Like you give me some game jam flashbacks right now.
Right. I wanted to ask, like, when you like you're in that state of like brainstorming and throwing stuff off, how do you nail down like, oh, this would make a good game? What makes you nail it down? You gotta nail it down and start working.
It's more like a democratic thing. So whoever.
Yeah, it's more like the entire team gets just excited. Yeah.
Personally, for me, I usually will take inspiration from other games, like mechanics and styles of other games that I like, and maybe like combine them together and kind of make something that makes sense. It's usually how my thought process works.
Or it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it's still
true.
nice. Yeah.
The thing is, usually people, their scope is way higher than what it should be.
Right.
Because usually go make for a bigger game, you know, oh, let's make the next RPG or something.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, game design is tricky like that because when you're just thinking in game design terms and the abstraction level that game design is, you normally don't think about like the deeper level to actually produce it and how big that can get. It's a big challenge. Even for the bigger companies, or even more for the bigger companies, and for everyone.
Games are the hardest to design.
Because it's hard to design, and it's hard to make sure you understand, and everyone understands what that is, and like how to communicate what you really thought about. Because really, the whole team needs to understand the experience you're trying to create, and all the designers.
That's why you refer other games for, like, oh, you remember this game? It's like this and like this. Exactly, so that's why people refer to other games.
Exactly.
But I think
so everybody imagines the same thing.
But even doing that, it's still like pretty hard because some people see different mechanics in different ways.
Oh yeah.
So like, something that is exciting for someone was like terrifying for someone else, and then like you need to compromise. What do you want to like really bring, and or how could you change that to merge, make it closer to the way you want it to be instead of the terrifying side for the other person. It's a discussion the team needs to make. Yeah, and then you can refer some other games like, oh, but they did this in this lower way, and now it's just like more chill, or we could vary the speed here. And then it's gonna be terrifying, and then it's gonna be quiet, and you get these quiet times, and so it's like more fun because you have some you have a curve of the gameplay here and things like that. You know, it's kind of like the punish versus reward kind of thing.
I feel like though in game jams, like the kind of brainstorming session, like I feel a lot of people, like surprisingly enough, well, at least from my experience, is that we don't really think of the game design as much as we think we are. Like we often talk about like the mechanics and like different like parts of the game that will like how it will look and things like that. But people don't really talk about like what kind of emotional response we're looking for like surprisingly enough.
Right.
Like that's what like Leandra is talking about. Like we don't really talk about, and it's something that people should do more, is that like take a few minutes to, like, after you're talking about maybe the mechanics that you want to do, like talk about like what kind of emotional response you're going to be focusing on, because like at that point like you'll start creating the mechanics, and then you'll have one person that will think it's like really scary, as for the other person that thinks it's like really fun. So yeah, it's definitely something like really important.
Yeah. The problem with game jams, specifically in this case, is that you normally don't feel like you have the time to do all that.
Yeah.
Like for us on Global Game Jam, for example, we were thinking about our game and stuff, and we could go deeper like that and like really nail down all the details first, which really helps, and it would be like even easier to make. Even though I think we did a good job, but then you look at the other teams going back and starting making things. They're like, wow, okay, so we have like this like 48 hours. We really need to get started. Yeah, and normally I don't really know how big it's gonna be, and how big it can get. It's especially because we're more inexperienced. We don't know like this many people we have. Can we make this? Can we not make this? Or some mechanics are gonna be harder to make than others, or some of the art is gonna be harder to produce than other parts of the game. We normally don't understand that enough. So it's where it gets fun, because they're like, you just realize later, and you're, wow, okay, so this is weird, and then you need to improvise.
Yeah.
This is why the more rigid and well planned your design is, the better the actual production experience is.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
Because then you're gonna end up switching stuff, and you realize the scope of the game is too big for 48 hours, and then you're gonna cut down. And that's really not a nice thing, Like usually when you end up cutting stuff down, you realize it doesn't look as good anymore as I originally thought. So it's better you come with a game that's not as ambitious. And then if you have enough time and you see that you can do it, then you can build up from there, which is pretty easy after that.
Yeah, exactly. What do we always hear, talking specifically about game gen, game design, and then we can get more of that when we talk about our game gen. We need to do our game gen talk, but is that you have an idea, and then you make it what is called like kind of like a vertical slice of that, and it's the smallest section of the game you can think of.
The skeleton.
Just the bare
bones.
Precisely just what you need, what's essential, and then even when you have that, you still cut more. You rethink it like 2 or 3 times until you have really like just the striking point of it, because that helps both you understand what is the most catching part of the game and what people are gonna look or interact more, and then you can really tweak the details of that specific essential parts to make that really solid and fun, and then you can build around that if you have the time or after. Because the more you spend time like refining the main catching part of the game, and what really the user will, or the player in this case, will most use or most interact with or most play, the better the experience will be for him. Yeah. So, and for a game jam, that's ideal, because you want that one single part, because you're basically like testing what your main idea is, and you really your game is gonna come off better if you cut it to the smallest parts. Yeah. So I mean that because you will really see, the team's gonna really see the idea flourish. That's what I mean. Because you have the time to refine these essential parts.
I kind of wanted to go back to what we were talking about before when it came to like the visual novels and stuff.
No, it's okay.
The more conceptual discussion.
We can go back, of course.
I just wanted to kind of like mention the point that games, for example, like the visual novel that you were using as an example, that had like you had to find like clues and things, and there was like a punish and reward sort of aspect to it. I just wanted to kind of transition to how important feedback is in a game, and it's like something that definitely makes games a lot more enjoyable. And when like feedbacks could be like just like sounds or like visuals or even like something changing in the game itself, like for the visual novel that we're talking about, like you discover a clue and all of a sudden there's like a whole new section of your story that you have access to, like, even if it's not like visual or and again sound, like you have like this sort of feedback. And I think all games and like should definitely take the time to like consider what kinds of feedbacks they want, and just to make the game more enjoyable in that aspect.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think feedback is something that like I've seen in like at least the game jams I've seen and I've like done is something that's like that was not really, because when you brainstorm you focus on the idea, the concept, and like how the mechanics, and then but then it's like, oh, they pick up the item. The player picks up the item, but then there's no like, and they put it like in their inventory, but there's no
sound of them.
There's no inventory. There's no UI. There's no sound. There's nothing. You don't know if you just know they picked it up and the object destroyed. But then the player itself, you don't think about what he, from a fresh pairs of eyes point of view, like what they're thinking.
Yeah.
They're if they don't get the feedback of what they're doing is right, then
they might think the game is broken.
Right. They might be like, is it working? Am I doing the right thing? And if you have a confused player, maybe that's what you're going for your game design. But if that's not what you're going for, you want it to be clear, then you have to make sure like you set up the net correctly for them. Yeah, that's a great point. Feedback is very important.
Game testing is a lot harder than you think. It's actually the unsung heroes of the gaming industry. Yeah. When you think of game testers.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
But it's actually a good entry job, especially I'm sure some of you here have done actually game testing.
I've done it for my own.
I don't know if anybody. Oh, okay. That's actually still like, you learn a lot when you test. There's actually some online jobs right now for game testing for whoever is interested. Some companies have game tester positions that are online.
That's cool.
Well, I need money. I'm interested.
Oh, I'm interested too. I saw yes.
It's actually an ad. I saw an ad. I think WB Games they have, or Gameloft. I don't remember. It's one of those in the companies. They had like online testing positions, and like people, like you should definitely look it up. People who actually you're gonna get a job in the gaming industry, you start there.
I've done testing before. It's fun. Yeah.
There's actually even studios here in Montreal that do game testing.
Right, they do. They ask a lot of questions though, which is the whole point of game testing.
Yeah, I did for Montreal once. It was nice. Yeah, it was fun.
I did a bunch for EA.
Oh wow.
Oh
wow. So it's your fault then.
He sabotaged the company. Who knows?
I got invited for a bunch of Ubisoft game like playtesting, but I've always been too lazy.
I've done a lot of beta testing for Ubisoft, but I never went there for a testing.
It's too lazy.
Not sure if they do physical testing.
The thing is, actually,
I signed up, but yeah.
It's difficult though, because like I got invited into the Ubisoft playtest, but they never like picked me up. Not even as a backup one. They always do they always do a phone call, ask you a bunch of questions, and then they just drop you off. That's it.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, what happened to
same
me
here,
for Eidos, I never tried Ubisoft before Eidos. When they call, you're practically in. They just ask you like your interests in when it comes to like the game they're testing, whatever. And then you most likely be, because then they say on the spot that if you're going or not. They don't like, oh, we're calling you back. They just say, yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
You can come this day at this time, whatever.
Yeah, it's the reverse for Ubisoft. They call you and you never know until like if you pick it not.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thing is, yeah, it's sad that actually when a game gets released, the game testers are the ones that are laid off first.
Yeah. Well,
They were not even invited to the opening party. That's how shitty it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sucks. Well, I think it's probably because it's like so easy to find game testers. You're very. Like,
Well, yeah, the
very
requirement
replaceable.
is like the base requirement is pretty much nothing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
You only have to like games, no programming experience, no art experience, just no basic high school English. That's it.
Right.
Some entry level job actually requires QA testers, game
Ooh,
testers to
okay.
have some knowledge of coding though. Like
I think in like bigger games,
from
I've
what I
seen, right?
remember reading. From what I remember reading, like you need to know the reporting bugs and all that within like special pipelines, all that. Like I was reading jobs for EA and for Ubisoft, like those pops up. Probably for senior position though, maybe.
We're kind of
For a
trailing.
while, like,
We're kind of trailing off.
I think it's
from,
good as well.
game design here, though. I feel.
That's true.
Come back.
Yeah.
But do you guys playtest your games? Like, do you think like in a game jam, it's important to play? I guess it is.
It is,
but
but
it's like
there's not that much time.
Yeah, but it's better.
Exactly,
It's better to finish the idea first, because essentially the playtest what happens in the end, and it's like it's better if you have something that like.
That
It's
works.
better that if you finish some things instead of you keep like you waste time testing too much that one little thing you just finished. You test it enough, like of course in a coding, like a programming perspective, you don't want it like to break the game and make sure that nothing crashes. That's the important part. But like actual game feel and stuff, you really need to like you leave it to the people that will be there.
Yeah.
Because that's the point. You're essentially making a prototype. That's something you need to have in mind.
Right,
of course, the more polished you get, if you have the time, you playtest it. Like, this is enough, so we have the extra time. Let's just test it and see, and like make sure we have something balanced. Then sure. Then I agreed with playtesting that case.
I kind of wanted to talk about like dynamics, like what made games like exciting, or I mean I mentioned like feedback, but like other examples of dynamics are like timers, or like adding probability. You could have like different player behaviors, like such as we could have games that someone decides to be aggressive or another person wants to explore. I think like that's another important part of game design, is like kind of understanding what will make it, I guess, more unique, because I don't know where I'm going with this, but like
what I think is important to consider in this case is like, what is your team's like strength? That's something people not often really consider, especially people that are meeting for the first time to make a game gen. Like, what do we have here? What do you like to do? What do you do best? Like, that's a conversation you can have before starting to design the game, and that would be interesting. because then you can play on the strengths, and that's where it brings uniqueness. So, for example, you have an artist that really likes to make like more cold color art and like has some more or unique style. Play around that. Use that unique style. What that reminds you. What makes you feel. We can use this to make a horror game, or use this to make. Or we can play around and make sure like it's still like cold colors and it's kind of terrifying, but it's like wacky. So it's still like funny. It's kind of like I don't know, Green Fandango or something. There's to play the comedy there. So I don't know. It's important to know your team, and it really helps if you can play around those strengths. For example, if you have more artists in your team, you can really make a game that has more art. I think that happened in Gamerella when we were there. They made like essentially you have just a house and you click around and it has cute animations. And you
that was
the
team behind us. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have like some kind of story you find just by clicking and looking at the animations. It's a small narrative, but it was cute, and you like for a 5-minute thing you just play around. It was pretty effective.
Yeah, it was more like a demo game.
Yeah, but like they play around those strengths and like it was really pretty.
Yeah, they're actually. I talked with the guys that most of them were all artists. That's why they focused on the
exactly.
art
Yeah,
aspect.
That's why I'm bringing that up.
So since
they did like a very simple thing.
Yeah, so since most of us here, I assume there's a lot of people in computer science here. So mostly people who do programming, then might focus on more programming, like program games, mobile games.
Like what part of game design would like what examples of like could programming make like if consider a team that's really bad at art, like what
puzzle
game
games,
design
100% puzzle
should they
games.
Focus? Puzzle?
That's a good one. That's a good category. Very good.
There's the game 248 on the phone, right? Like there's no art, but there's mostly like algorithms behind it and procedural things or whatever. Mostly mobile games. Those games are mostly done by programmers who have almost zero experience with art, and they play around with primitive shapes like cubes and all that. The other one, the stack game, I'm sure you've seen it, where you stack the cubes and get smaller every time you miss a bit. Those are games that are made by actual programmers.
Right.
Some people went as far, they said they're not even going to use an engine. They might go right away to like programming, like OpenGL and all that.
Games like that make them successful is like fairness, I guess. So
yeah.
Like if you're like doing a game that has like that uses like dice, you have to take into consideration like the probability of you getting like a 7 as opposed to a 1 or I guess a 2 when rolling dice, and using those different outcomes to make the game like fair, because I guess for individual players it's not as big of a deal, but when it comes to like playing games that you have to like, against another player, those things are very important, and you have to really be careful when it comes to algorithm, and you have to if for a game jam, you really have to be careful that what you're doing makes sense.
I agree.
I'm trying to find something. You could continue talking.
Well, the thing is, especially people who are doing like their first time doing a jam, those people are usually the most excited and they don't know where to start. So most of them, like they kind of ignore the design part, so they focus more on the theme and the technicality, like, this player is going to shoot lasers, or this player is going to do this and that. You know, they don't think, is it going to look bad? Is it going to make the game too overpowered? Well, I mean, it's just a game jam at the end of the day, but those are things that really, like,
really
for
people that are more new, I think as long as you have like one mechanic and you make that work, like from a programming perspective, that's like a victory. make that work, and then if you have like a designer or you want to like really fool around with game design, then you can like get the mechanic you prototyped, and then you tweak it and make it fun. Like, what can we add here to this mechanic specifically? Like, it's just a jump or a dash.
But the thing about puzzle games is that even if the actual like core of the game has some flaws when it comes to probability or like fairness, like even like the as much as the person can fix it with like beautiful art and things like that, the game will be equally as bad if like the puzzles don't work, or like
yeah.
So like I think it is an important part of the game design to make sure that like even in a game jam, if you have like computer scientists and you're trying to do something that's technically challenging, I think you really have to make sure that I mean, like, you get the right. I mean, that I've never really done a puzzle.
You put some thought into it. That's what you mean.
Yeah, you have to put some thought into it. Like, even if yeah.
No, it's really thoughtful. I remember in the game jam when we were in the team, we spent a lot of time on the design part. Actually, we spent a good 2-3 hours, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we did a good job because we had a lot of people, so we really needed that.
Now, especially now that we're only 4, it's good that you guys put a limit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like people actually know, like they're gonna focus on most things, and they're gonna think, oh, we're only 4, so I pretty much gonna do 1/4 of the project instead of having like 10 people, because there's 10 people. Usually, people are not gonna feel like they contributed too much because it's different when there's 4 people and 10.
Kind of like that. Even teams of 4, there's always some people maybe that feel they didn't contribute as much.
Oh well, yeah, it happens, of course. But I'm sure even at school assignments, they felt that way. But usually, the smaller the team, the more weight you feel like you have, the more pressure. So that's why usually smaller teams do better, because they actually have this pressure on them. Like, oh shit, okay, we're competing against teams of 10, and they might do better than us. So might as well rush or get the adrenaline rush and keep working. But I don't know if you guys realize, most of the teams that won that during the game jam were mostly either small teams, but the big teams were mostly professionals. Those were professionals.
Oh yeah,
they had
an unfair advantage.
Yeah, they knew the game design pipeline from the beginning.
Yeah, they already understand.
And I think that's why, if you guys realize, most people who are game designers, they didn't start as game designers. They started as actually programmers or artists. Because game designer, you actually become if you have the experience, and not really the portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a student, you actually have to understand the whole pipeline.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we could discuss regarding game design?
Well, are you guys who's participating here in the game jam? Everybody?
Very much,
so.
yeah.
I think so.
We're all in the Discord.
Execs though, because
but even execs, are execs part of, like, can they play?
Well,
yeah, I plan to participate.
We don't know, because we're the ones giving the prizes, and like we don't want to be like, oh well, like we want our own prizes.
We don't want to come off like biased in a certain way, because it's like that's not the point.
Yeah.
So what's the prize? Pigeons?
That's not the point of making the game jam to take the prize.
Still a secret. Yep.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
Friday.
Pigeon dating simulator. That's a prize.
Maybe.
Oh, definitely.
We can wait till the weekend. You'll know.
Okay, there you go.
They're good prizes. So.
How many teams are there, anyways?
Well, I mean,
Leandro?
we don't really know yet, because people make their teams. Huh?
Yeah, true. There's not many people who have made a team yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
Hopefully, people will make their teams at least on Friday.
Friday,
At the
yeah.
very
Friday.
least.
We schedule sometime. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Well, me guys, I'm actually gonna go if that's okay,
yeah,
because I actually have to
I think
go
we're
do some work.
Yes, I think we're pretty much done too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
we're
really,
over.
we didn't
It's been a
plan
good
that
hour,
much.
though.
Yeah, we really
Cool.
didn't plan that much content for this thing, so.
Oh,
yeah,
we've been for an hour here anyway, so.
this was
It's
just
more of
supposed
a
to be a
discussion, to be
discussion,
honest.
so it's not.
Yeah,
Right,
it's good.
right.
Yeah, thanks for participating. Actually, that was fun.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very
They were
much.
really useful. The whole workshop was useful.
Yeah, we'll have
Like-
we'll also have a talk of game jam in general, and we're gonna cover some other points, like organization and like things like that. And
Yeah.
go more in deep level of some things we did mention here as well already.
Yeah.
So please come back. Yeah, any people that already were in a game jam can pitch in, and it's gonna be a lot
Oh,
of
of
fun.
course.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be like today.
Sounds good.
It's just a nice little light discussion. and-
No, it was
Yeah.
still good though. It was
Right.
still good.
And bring questions if you have any. Like, we can always discuss stuff together before the game jam.
Of course. All right, we'll be ready. When is the game jam discussion?
Tomorrow, 5 p.m.
Tomorrow. Oh, 5 Oh yeah. Game
Yes.
jam 101. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So guys, have a good
you
rest
very
of the day,
You
and
too.
keep
Yes.
up with the good
Thanks
work.
for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
Thanks for being
Yeah.
here.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
night.
you. Have
Good
a good
night.
evening,
Good
guys.
night, everyone.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Have a good
Have a
evening.
good evening.
Yeah. See you next
See you
time.
tomorrow.